Good day to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook video for today, Monday, August 25th, 2025. Happy Monday and happy brand new start of a new week. Let's start off with the National Hurricane Center homepage with Tropical Storm Fernand being the main topic of discussion right now in the Atlantic, as everything else is quiet. Invest 99L, which looked very interesting yesterday and throughout the entirety of last week, finally has begun to disintegrate due to very strong easterly trades that we typically see in the Eastern Caribbean. So 99L is no longer something that we're going to have to watch very closely anymore. Although, you never know, as I said before, just because something dies away and doesn't develop out here in the Eastern tropics does not mean that it could reignite somewhere in the Western Caribbean or the Gulf. And that very well could happen with 99L, but it's completely fallen apart yesterday and today, and now not really much to talk about with it anymore. So obviously not any longer on the National Hurricane Center tropical weather bulletin. We obviously have Fernand, though, maximum sustained winds at 60 miles per hour and a minimum central pressure of 1,000 millibars. But this is going to stay out to sea and not impact anybody, and probably not going to get any stronger than what it is right now. But we have to turn our attention to the Eastern Pacific because things are really beginning to heat up there as well. Finally, after several weeks of slumber in the Eastern Pacific, after they had a very active early season, looks like things are starting to become more active there. We now have Tropical Storm Juliette, which formed today. Maximum sustained winds at 45 miles per hour with a minimum central pressure of 1,003 millibars. And it is located at 17.1 north and 113.1 west if you are tracking it. And then we have two other areas of interest that we need to watch in the Eastern Pacific, so things are likely going to get pretty active there over the next several days. But I not only want to talk to you about the future of activity in general, but I also want to talk to you, again, going back to the thumbnail, which I failed to mention as I just introduced the video, but I do want to talk about the Atlantic especially because things are now going to become more favorable in the Atlantic. And they are actively becoming more favorable right now as we are beginning to head into the peak of the hurricane season. So we're really going to have to watch the Atlantic over the next several weeks, but at least for now, lots of the activity once again happening in the Eastern Pacific. Here's a satellite image of how things are going on in the Atlantic right now, and you can see it overall. It's pretty quiet. Nothing in the Eastern MDR right now. We do have waves coming off, but they are not as aggressive right now. We have a suppressive phase of the MJO moving through. So obviously that's why we see things a lot less favorable over the Eastern Atlantic right now. And then you can see here, Invest 99L, definitely no longer a concentrated and stubborn wave like it was over the last several days here as it was traversing the MDR. Now it's just completely stretched out and pretty much got completely shredded by the very strong easterly, lower level easterly winds that we have here in the Eastern Caribbean. So that's pretty much it for 99L in terms of any major development chances in the near term future. And then obviously we have Tropical Storm Fernand here. Let's actually really quickly zoom in on Fernand. And you can see still holding on as a tropical system, but definitely doing a little bit less better today than it was yesterday. You could clearly see there's a lot much more or a lot stronger, trying to use proper grammar here, sorry, but there's a lot stronger of wind shear beginning to impact Fernand now compared to yesterday where conditions were still favorable for it in terms of intensification. So we're probably not going to see intensification of Fernand anymore. So the 60 mile per hour peak that we have now, that's probably just about as how strong Fernand is going to get. And then it's going to probably from here on out begin to die out. And as we head towards the middle of this week, Fernand will probably become a post-tropical low somewhere over the northern Atlantic. But it'll die out and probably completely disintegrate and fade from existence. And luckily, We won't have to talk about any impacts as well to pretty much anywhere. This is well east of Bermuda, so obviously no impacts to Bermuda. And this is pretty much just going to fade away over the next week. Definitely nothing close to especially Hurricane Aaron, which even though as it was dying out and moving away from the East Coast, it just had so much energy behind it that it was continuing to produce mass amounts of swells and waves for pretty much the entirety of the coastline. Definitely not going to be the case with Fernand, so not going to have to worry about this anymore after the middle portion of this week. And really nothing to worry about with Fernand right now at all, since it's, again, a weak system and it's going to stay out to sea. So that's enough with what's happening in the Atlantic right now. Let's start to shift over to the Pacific. And you can see there's definitely a lot more convective activity here in the Pacific. And that's because the MJO is now beginning to move through the Pacific again after it was in the Atlantic for a while, which is obviously why we had an uptick in activity here in the Atlantic with Hurricane Aaron and now Fernand too. And you could even say 99L maybe got boosted because of the MJO. But now we're starting to see the MJO return into the Pacific, and you could obviously see things are a lot more active here. We obviously have Tropical Storm Juliette, and luckily that too is going to stay out to sea as well. Not expected to impact the Mexican coastline, and in fact, I'll show you the National Hurricane Center forecast for Juliette right now at 45 miles per hour, and it's going to stay on a west-northwest to northwest track, well away from the coast of Mexico. Obviously, maybe we'll have to worry about some swells, maybe some higher rip currents along the coastline, but no direct impacts expected from Juliette, and then it's going to probably die out once we get to the end of the week. But again, why all this is happening? Why is the Atlantic now less active and the Pacific more active? Well, you could pretty much see with this velocity potential map, as of today, you see all these oranges and yellows here that represents sinking motion or an unfavorable MJO now beginning to set up in the Atlantic. So obviously that's why things are a lot less favorable and things are a lot more quiet right now in the Atlantic. And on the other hand, you can see we have quite a bit of these blues here, which represents rising motion, negative velocity potential anomalies, which is obviously a positive MJO signal, very strong in the Pacific right now. And actually, because of that, there is also quite a bit of Western Pacific activity because that's where most of the MJO is right now. We do have a typhoon which is impacting Taiwan. I do not remember the name of it, but it is a pretty impactful and a pretty strong typhoon that is right now bringing impacts to Taiwan. And I think the West Pacific is also going to be pretty active in the coming weeks as well. But you could see, too, that MJO is now beginning to make its way into the Central Pacific. And very soon here, it's going to be more favorable for the Eastern Pacific. And obviously, that is where lots of the activity is right now, at least in terms of current areas that we are watching. But I think this is all going to change because, as I've said before, I mean, it is pretty warm in the Pacific, actually, but just take a look at the sea surface temperature anomaly pattern in the Atlantic right now. Very, very favorable, and it's getting more favorable, as I'll show you in the next slide. But sea surface temperature anomalies are getting very, very warm. It is late August, and it is a very favorable pattern. And again, we are getting into the meat of the hurricane season. It's only a matter of time before the switch flips, as we like to say every single season. And obviously, conditions might not be favorable now, but that it's not going to stay that way. And believe me, once conditions actually start becoming much more favorable for an actual flip into the heart of the hurricane season, the actual peak, because Aaron was kind of the precursor, although I still say that Aaron is just the beginning of the peak. We're gonna have the flip switch happen with the hurricane season soon. And I do want to bring you this map up. This is the sea surface temperature anomaly change over the last 2 weeks, and quite the amount of cooling that we had here in the subtropics. And I say this because, especially if you've been following me quite a bit over the last several months, you know that One of the biggest things that people would always question about the hurricane season is how warm the subtropics are, because we can have a very warm MDR, but also having a very warm subtropics tends to throw things off balance, and we tend to get issues with focusing the energy and rising motion in the deep tropics in order for us to get an actually traditionally active hurricane season in the Atlantic. But take a look at what's happened in the last 2 weeks. And man, have we just seen, and this is especially because of the last several days, man, have we seen things cool down quite a bit here in the subtropics, especially in the northwestern Atlantic. And obviously, you could probably guess that this is very much due to the fact of Erin. Erin was really that much of an intense and energetic storm that it really took out so much energy and warm water from the northern Atlantic and the subtropics. And conversely, on the other hand, especially further east here, through the Canary Current, off the Iberian Peninsula down into the far eastern Atlantic, things have warmed up quite a bit. And sea surface temperature anomalies are also continuing to warm up throughout the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. So any warming that we've seen or any cooling that we've seen because of Erin has been completely off the East Coast and in the subtropics. And again, taking a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies through the deep tropics, they remain very warm, especially into the Caribbean and Gulf, on average at least a degree Celsius above normal. It is quite literally waiting for a bomb to explode in the Atlantic. And even though it's not going to happen now, even though things might not be favorable, at least for the immediate next week or so, again, it is only August 24th. We are only now just beginning to get into the ramp up to the peak of the hurricane season. And this is really a sign of things becoming more favorable again. And I've said this before, that usually the most optimal pattern for sea surface temperature anomalies for us to have a really active hurricane season is if things are cooler in the subtropics and things are warmer in the deep tropics, especially in the eastern MDR, and then of course obviously all the anomalies being concentrated most in the deep tropics, because that helps focus the energy in the deep tropics. We don't have any issues with subsidence where the subtropics and the deep tropics are competing for who will be the dominant force. And that's kind of an issue that we've had over the last several years, and what's led to a lot of these dry air intrusions and situations in the Atlantic. But this happening, especially again, we are literally getting into the last week of August, and this pattern happening right as we're heading into the last week of August and into early September. And I want to show you the velocity potential anomalies here too. Obviously we have much less favorable conditions now, but look here at these green anomalies, especially as we head towards the next 2 weeks. Obviously we're going to have the MJO first go through the Pacific, and obviously we're seeing that with lots of activity beginning to pop up in the Pacific. So at least over the next week or so, as we close out the month of August, things will be more active in the Pacific. But notice as we head into September, the actual peak month of the hurricane season, we start seeing a lot more of these green anomalies begin to make their way into the tropical Atlantic. And again, just looking at the fact that things are becoming more favorable in the Atlantic, we are seeing an active shift in the sea surface temperature anomaly pattern, once again in large part because of Hurricane Erin. Especially as we get into September, we're really going to have to watch out. And that's when we're probably going to see the lid fully come off in the Atlantic. I will admit, I kind of thought that was going to happen with Erin, and that we would already be continuing to ramp up in activity over the next week right now, starting with Erin. But obviously, as you can see, we have much less favorable velocity potential anomalies in the Atlantic right now, a less favorable MJO phase, and obviously because of that, less activity. And obviously, I'll just show you the GFS model from the 12Z. You can see at least over the next week that being reflected. Not much in the way of activity in the Atlantic basin, at least for the next week. there is this interesting low that is off the East Coast, and I've seen a few people mention that that might be something we need to watch, that might try to potentially consolidate, but obviously will probably not become anything, significant, and especially anywhere near the intensity that Aaron was. Although to be fair, Aaron was a deep tropical storm. But at least in terms of anything developing right now, and I will say this is a little bit unusual, and we did also kind of have this last year, where for some reason, as things went into the last week of August and then into the first week of September, for some reason things were quiet, and usually you would think that it would be the opposite. And looks like it's going to happen again this year, that at least for the last week or so of this month, things are probably going to be quiet. And obviously we could use the quiet. We need time to prepare for the hurricane season, and obviously, enjoy the quiet before the storm while it lasts. But again, because of the MJO being less favorable, at least over the next week, the Atlantic will be less favorable, although you could see a pretty aggressive wave here around a week out starts to move off the coast of Africa, and this is literally on the very first day of September, which begins, I believe, next week. Yeah, next week is the very first day of September, and I've actually seen that other models, especially the European, I think does have this wave, and it does actually try to develop it as it progresses into the Atlantic, but that is beyond a week out. And obviously, not really something we can be too certain of in terms of whether or not it will develop right now. So we'll have to see how things shape up here over the next several weeks. But I can assure you, it's going to be quiet right now for the near-term future, but do not expect it to stay that way. We are literally in the last week of August, and then heading into September. It's obviously going to change, and it's going to happen at any moment. It's just a matter of when. But really quickly, to end off, I want to show you what happens here in the Pacific. Obviously, things are getting more active, although we have Juliette here. That remains offshore of Mexico, so no direct impacts to Mexico expected. And then we have something else here that tries to develop in the GFS, and then there's also something else here just off the coast of Mexico that happens around a week to 10 days out. So we have a few areas to watch in the Eastern Pacific as we close out the month of August. And now we're beginning to head into the month of September. We're beginning to head into the meat of the hurricane season, and things are really going to start getting more active in both basins, but obviously a special emphasis on what happens in the Atlantic, since things are becoming more favorable, and I would really be interested to see how that reflects in the peak of activity in the hurricane season. But for now, that is all that is there to talk about, really, since obviously things are going to be quiet for the next week. So not much else to go over, at least in the Atlantic for now. So with that being said, I'm going to end it off for today's video. Hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, please leave a like, comment. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to answer, although I'm pretty good with answering comments. And subscribe to my channel if you enjoy what you saw today and you want more content like this. Turn on the notification bell as well, so you can get videos the moment I upload them, and also you can get notifications too for when I do live streams as well, because I also try to do those, and I will try to do more of those, especially as we head into the peak of the hurricane season. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all, and I'll be back with more tomorrow, as always.